Well, you guys know by now. I'm Mr. Solderback. I am the director here at the College and Career Center for Vista High School. And today we have James Allen, and he is here to talk to you about his career, which is a bunch of design, project management, and banking all mixed into one.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Hi, everyone. Happy to be speaking to you. One of the things that is kind of interesting about the career path I've had is it's, like Stephen said, it's been kind of all over the place. But just a little bit about myself. I'm a dog dad. I have two golden retrievers. I'm a product designer. My educational background is in graphic design. And currently I'm working as a project manager at a commercial bank called Silvergate, and I'll speak about them a little bit more later on. But there's three kind of main things I wanted to share with y'all today. One was, like I said, my kind of weird career path. It's been very non-linear. I also want to talk a little bit about design and how it impacts business and our everyday lives, and why I think it's a great field to be in, and something that you should definitely consider if you have any interest in that. And then third, I'll talk a little bit about my involvement with project management and working at Silvergate. One of the things that makes Silvergate unique in the financial services space is that we have a lot of companies who are digital currency and fintech companies. So we have clients who actually deal directly with Bitcoin, Ethereum, and other cryptocurrencies. And we have been and still are one of the few banks in the US that has been willing to work with them and has the infrastructure to support them. So going into kind of my career path, I studied high school. I went to high school at High Tech High in Point Loma in San Diego. And I studied graphic design at San Diego City College. So I've only gone to a community college, but San Diego City College has an amazing graphic design program. Anybody who's interested in that, definitely recommend considering them, taking a look at their program. Later on, I'll paste a link in chat to their website. But I was really fortunate in high school to have been able to participate in internships in 11th and 12th grade. When I was a junior, I did I want to say like a 2 or 3 month long internship at a small design firm in downtown San Diego. It was like 2 or 3 people, super small, but very, very good learning experience. And that's actually how I found out about the design program at City College. And so it was super valuable in kind of helping me figure out where I wanted to go to school. And it helped me confirm that design was something that I did want to study and did want to do later on as a career. And then the second internship, I actually did 2 internships in 12th grade. One, I split half the week at a marketing department at Paradise Valley Hospital in National City, and the other one was with a husband and wife wedding photography team. So very different businesses. One was pretty big, one was 2 people, and me in a little rented office space. But it gave me kind of an idea of what I wanted to do, and it helped me see the differences between having your own business and working for yourself versus working in a large bureaucratic organization like a hospital. And so after those experiences, like I said, I went to City College at the encouragement of our counselor at the high school. I filled out the FAFSA. I managed to get a Pell Grant because growing up, I don't come from a wealthy family. Finances definitely were a challenge growing up. So I was able to qualify for a Pell Grant. And so my education at City College was extremely, extremely affordable. And so definitely if you're interested in that, and if you think you could benefit from that, even if you don't think you could, definitely recommend applying for the FAFSA if you haven't already. So moving on, in my kind of first job, if you will, when I was in high school, I was hoping to get hired. Nobody wanted to hire me as a high schooler. So in 10th grade, my best friend from high school and I decided to start our own business. And our first client was his mom, who's an interior designer. And we did a little bit of everything from designing websites to creating posters and creating promo videos and doing photography. Honestly, to be completely honest with you, we didn't know exactly what we were doing. right? We were learning and making things up as we went along, but it was a super valuable experience. And thankfully, our high school had the resources to where every student had access to a laptop and Adobe Photoshop and Dreamweaver and After Effects and these other video editing tools. So we had a chance to play around with this doing projects in high school. And then we would go turn around and actually try and do work for small businesses or local nonprofits. So I did that throughout high school and college, running my own business and doing freelance work. And I had a chance to work for my own college. I produced some work for them and actually got paid for it. I've done paid and pro bono work for nonprofits around the San Diego area. And it's been a really rewarding and super, super informative experience. But because of that, and having gotten the taste of owning my own business and being my own boss, I decided to try doing a little bit more of that later on. Both my parents are teachers, English teachers, and growing up, we had international students living with us. We were a homestay family, so students from Taiwan, Brazil, Chile, a bunch of other places. They would stay with us typically over the summer or winter. And so eventually we got the idea of starting our own business to find homestay families in the US. You can almost think of it like a super personalized Airbnb for international students. And unfortunately, we didn't have the resources or the connections to really have the business take off. We did make some money, but it definitely wasn't enough to live off of. So my parents and myself, we still had our quote unquote day jobs while we were trying to make that work. While we were trying to get this business off the ground, I realized that we didn't have access to good software to keep track of our customers, to keep track of potential customers and all of the things we needed to do for them. And that inspired me to try and design a CRM application. Basically, CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management. It's a tool that helps you keep track of all the people and tasks that you have related to your business. And I didn't make any money off of this. If anything, I lost money. And so while I was doing all of that, I was also driving for Uber and Lyft. And in the middle, I had a pretty good IT contractor job that I got at a senior living community because I didn't mention this yet, but I have kind of informal background in computers and technology. And after that year went up, I went back to doing Uber, and I even delivered packages for Amazon Flex for a little bit. So when I say I've had a weird career path, I mean weird. It's been all over the place. But so far, I've only been an employee for two different companies. I worked part-time during college doing IT for another senior living community in National City. And then I have my full-time job with Silvergate today as a project manager. And the interesting thing is, people will own their own business, and you might see friends or you might see other people on Instagram talking about how they're hustling and how they have their own business. And a lot of people like to flex and pretend that they have this glamorous lifestyle as an entrepreneur. But the reality is, it's very difficult when you're getting started. And when I was in high school, some years I made almost virtually nothing. And in my best year, it was still under $10,000 in that year. When I was in college, it was a little bit more, but still, I didn't make any more than $15,000 while I was in college. After college, especially because of the IT position that I had, I started making some more money, and I managed not quite 50,000, but it was starting to reach the $50,000 a year income. And then after I came to Silvergate being a more established business, being in finance and having good benefits and good pay, that really boosted my annual income. And I've been very fortunate to have people who believed in me and who valued my work and my worth as an employee and who promoted me. And so I'm not quite at $100,000 a year, but within the next year or two, I'm potentially going to be in that 100K range. And that's, again, with a community college education. I'm not saying everybody can do it or that it's the right path for everybody, but I figured it's helpful to share this information because I definitely didn't imagine that I would be working at a bank as a project manager as I am today. And my path definitely wasn't linear and clear to there, but it has been a very rewarding ride so far. So One thing I will say is the work that you do, even if it's just personal projects or passion projects, you never know like how that's going to prepare you for your next job. When I started working on this business at Scriptorio to design CRM software, and when I was working at a senior living community doing IT, um, the skills that I learned there really prepared me for what I'm doing today at Silvergate without me even realizing it or planning for it. Because I was building a CRM for myself, it just so happened that Silvergate had a position open for a CRM analyst, which is my starting position at the company. And so my very first project at the bank was working to implement software similar to what I was designing just on my own. And that really is one of the big things that helped me land that job. And so just kind of briefly looking at, being your own boss versus being an employee, one of the things I've loved about being my own boss is being able to set my own schedule, my own rules. But the downside there is that typically you'll have less stability, right? You are depending on yourself for your income and the hours that you put in and the clients that you manage to get or not get. With being an employee, you have to follow someone else's schedule. You have to ask for permission to get vacation and whatnot, but there is more stability. I have a retirement account now, right? I have a 401k and I'm saving for the future when I retire. So there's definitely pros and cons to both. And so far I've found, benefits to both. I still want to own my own business in the future, but for now, especially with the pandemic and everything that's going on, I've definitely appreciated the stability of being a full-time employee. So, setting your own prices and salary, you have more freedom there when you work for yourself. There's still room for negotiating when you're an employee, and you should try. You should go on sites like Glassdoor and LinkedIn and see what average salaries are across different job titles and industries. But there is, I will admit there is a little bit less room for negotiating, at least in my personal experience. Then the last thing I'll say is being your own boss versus working for an employer. One of the best things I've found working at a bank is just there's so many smart coworkers that I have. I'm learning a ton from them, probably more than what I learned just working for myself. But one of the huge benefits of working for an employer is also the outside experts that they'll bring in. Sometimes they'll bring in consultants, and being able to work on projects with them or being able to learn from them and see how they operate. That has been really helpful for me in my career so far. So I'm going to move on to talking about kind of design and how I think about it and how it can impact business. Design is everywhere. If you think about the clothes you're wearing, the phone, the Chromebook or laptop that you're using, right? Somebody designed that. It was a product designer, it was a UI designer, UX designer. If you think about the apps that you use every day, those were all designed by teams of people. And so, design can be used to improve everything from physical products. Like if you think about how cell phones used to be before the iPhone, if any of you remember or have seen videos, like we've definitely come a long way. We still have a long way to go. But one of the things that's super important to me about design and that I appreciate about it is that it has been and it can continue to be used for good. Design has historically been used to fight for change that is really needed. It was used in the civil rights movement and was used more recently. It's being used today, and it's definitely something that I think is important for designers to think about. Many people in the tech industry are starting to realize some of the unintended consequences of the technology that we create. And so designing with an ethical mindset and a set of values is super important for anyone who's thinking about becoming a designer. So I'm going to flip through a couple things that I did in college. Some of this stuff is from my portfolio. Design isn't just about websites and apps. Book covers can be designed. There are designers who have made entire careers, designing for books, working for small businesses. If you've gone to a restaurant and a year ago or recently, as things are starting to open up, the menu, the business cards, the branding, all of those things are designed. And when I was helping my family business get off the ground, we didn't have money to open an office overseas. We didn't have money to pay employees to do a bunch of sales. So our primary sales tool was our website. And we had 100% online sales. Every customer we got was because we had a brand that was carefully and thoughtfully designed. And we had a website that conveyed all of the information they needed and got them interested enough to contact us. So design also can help us think about new ways of communicating with each other or using technology. Stephen mentioned most of you are using Chromebooks, and you've probably experienced, if you have a Mac or a Windows laptop at home, you may have noticed there's software on those devices that you can't necessarily use on your Chromebooks. So one of my friends, while I was in college, was working on a startup to essentially allow you to run desktop software like Photoshop or something else on a Chromebook through your browser, which is a pretty cool concept. And I think he's still working on that. So I redesigned the branding for his company. We redesigned the application, and basically the pitch was, his product is a desktop PC in your browser. So good design generally correlates to good results, especially in business. One example I can give kind of in the financial services space is a challenger bank or a fintech company called Chime. You may have heard of them. Back in 2018, they'd opened over 2 million checking accounts, and they were adding more customers per month than giant banks like Wells Fargo and Citibank. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that they were online only. They had a really well-designed app, and people liked their straightforward, kind of easy approach. If you think about banking, and if you have or your parents have an account with a more traditional bank, sometimes it can be kind of frustrating dealing with kind of like an outdated user interface or an outdated app. We're starting to get better, but definitely 5 years ago, is pretty painful, and sometimes it's still pretty painful today. McKinsey is a large consulting firm, and they did a study spanning 5 years, looking at over 300 public companies, and they ranked them with their level of design maturity and how good their design was in their products and their overall business. And they found over a 5-year period that companies that exercised the best design practices, their revenues over that 5-year period grew around 10%, whereas other companies were only around 3 to 6%. And when it came to returns to shareholders, because these are public companies, right? If you invest in a company, you're hoping that one day the stock price is this, in the future it's going to be higher. The companies that invested in good design had higher stock prices and overall returns to shareholders compared to companies that didn't really care about design or invest in it as much. So there's definitely a correlation between great design and good performance as a company. So something to think about as it relates to graphic design, it's a lot more than just logos and signage or menus. There are so many different things that you can do in the field of graphic design, from user experience and thinking about how people use applications and user behavior, to just focusing on the visuals. You can do both. There's a lot of people that do both. I happen to do a little bit of both. There's web design. If you're more kind of creative and you want a more kind of hands-on approach, like you can go into illustration or animation. It doesn't have to be just branding and logos. One area that I'm not very familiar with, but falls under the umbrella of design, is video game design. Characters, game level design, there's so much that you can do in that. And if you don't have any interest in creating something visual, and you're interested more in kind of like the psychology aspect and human behavior, there are job titles called UX researchers, where you conduct studies and you conduct research on user behavior about how they use certain products or applications. You don't even have to touch, Photoshop or Figma or any kind of design tool as a user researcher. Branding and visual identity is great. I really, really enjoy this, and I can talk a little bit more about that later. And then publication, editorial, and packaging, those are, again, more hands-on. If you think about any package you've bought in a store or you've ordered from Amazon or Etsy or somewhere else, typically if there's packaging, somebody designed that, right? Some designer somewhere designed the packaging, and that is a potential career path. So moving on to kind of my work as a project manager and working at a bank focused on cryptocurrency, it's been interesting. Silvergate has grown a ton over the past 10 years. In 2009, we had around 40 employees. Today, we have around 220 employees. As of the end of 2020, we had around 1,000 cryptocurrency and fintech related clients. These include big exchanges like Gemini, If any of you have watched um, The Social Network, the story of Facebook, and you've heard about the Winklevoss twins. They're the founders of Gemini, and they kind of had some disagreements with Mark Zuckerberg around Facebook and the founding of that. Binance is a large exchange who their US operations bank with us. Coinbase, you may have heard of them. All of these places you can buy Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So they hold some of their dollars at Silvergate, and that is part of our business model. One of the things that makes Silvergate special is we enable our clients to send money to each other in real time. If you've ever tried sending money to somebody through a traditional bank account, typically you'll notice it'll take you 2 to 3 business days sometimes for that transaction to clear. And we're impatient, we're busy, we hate waiting, right? So, like, why is that? The reason for that is that a lot of our banking system is relying on super, like, decades old technology that has not been updated in decades. And we're starting to have some improvements. There's things like Zelle that banks have worked on that's definitely improved things. There's fintech companies like Venmo and Cash App that make it a little bit better, but they're still not necessarily fully fledged bank accounts, at least not yet. So one of the things that Silvergate does for our clients is we allow our clients to transfer money to each other in real time, literally in most cases in under a second, either through our online banking portal or through an API, which basically means developers and engineers can build software to communicate with our banking platform, and they don't even need to log into online banking. They can write a program or an app that moves money for them. And so in 2020, over $136 billion was transferred on our platform between our clients. And that number is it's just been amazing to see how that's grown. So a little bit about what work is like there. Pre-pandemic, I used to go to this building every day in La Jolla. We're right across from UTC. If you've ever been to the UTC Mall, we're not too far from there. I liked our office. We had a nice kitchen space where we could hang out and eat lunch or just take a break. There were snacks that we could always go and eat. The one thing that I hated, though, was kind of the commute, right? I had an hour-long commute back and forth every day. One thing I do miss from there, though, is we had standing desks. So even though I didn't like the open office setup because there's a lot of noise. I would always have headphones in, but I liked our standing desks, and we even had a foosball table, so that was kind of cool. But after the pandemic started, we all switched to an entirely remote working situation. And I know for y'all, it's probably annoying and tiring after a certain amount of time of being on Zoom calls all day, like we are on right now. But that is my life. And that is the life for a lot of people right now who are working from home. So this is a picture of my setup. And this is essentially what I look at for most of the day. Every now and then I'll take a break and I'll go out and hang out with my dogs or take a brief walk or something. But for the most part, I'm indoors, I'm on calls, I'm meeting with people. But to be honest, I enjoy it, and I really don't miss the hour-long drive I used to have. So if anything, I would say working from home has kind of been a blessing in disguise. So talking a little bit about project management in general, like there are definitely important skills being a project manager that I think apply in many different positions. Time management is a huge one. Being able to adapt to change is huge because you might have a plan. We always have a project plan for every project we do, but things almost never go 100% according to plan. That's just not how the world works. So being willing to adapt to change is super important. Leadership and communication, being able to negotiate with people, have trade-offs, being able to compromise and get other people to compromise with you is super important. Fortunately, where I work, there really isn't any drama, but we're human. So eventually there's disagreements. People get hurt or get upset with each other. And so as a project manager, sometimes you have to deal with that personally, or you have to deal with that if it's happening with somebody else on the project. So being able to handle that is important. Research for the projects, managing budgets, just general problem solving, those are all things that are super important. And one thing I really want to briefly touch on is, like I said, my background is not in finance. right? I don't come from a wealthy family. I don't come from like an accounting or banking background. And so one thing that you may experience, you may have experienced this already, and you may experience it in the future, is this idea of imposter syndrome, where you doubt your abilities. You might feel like a fraud. You might feel like you don't belong somewhere. Like I described to you earlier, I've only gone to community college. I don't have a bachelor's. I don't have as much education or experience as some of my colleagues. And so there have been times working at a company like Silvergate, which is doing incredible things and has incredible people there. Sometimes, you might feel like you don't belong or like you don't fit in. And I want to bring this up because if you ever feel this in the future, I want you to know that you're not the only one that's felt that before. So many people have felt that before, and I think it's really important for you today, and as you start thinking about your career, really know your self-worth, love yourself as a person, know that you do have intrinsic value outside of your career and outside of your job. And if you ever do feel like an imposter, know that there's plenty of other people that do. They just might not be talking about it out loud. So, with that said, a couple of the projects that I've worked on at Silvergate, one of my favorite projects that I've worked on was in 2019, where we actually rebranded the entire bank. And I'll walk you through that in a little bit. And so this was great because I got to bring in my design experience into my job as a project manager. We redesigned the site in 2019 as well. Like I said, the first project I worked on when I got hired was on a CRM to help keep better track of our customers and what we needed to do for them. Another project that I spent some time working on was around digital asset custody. So some of our clients actually choose to have us secure their Bitcoin for them. And so that is something that we've recently started doing. Another project I worked on in 2020, which was really cool, was redesigning an online banking portal, essentially from the ground up. And another one was around a law. You may have heard of the CCPA, or the California Consumer Privacy Act, something that larger companies have to comply with. And so I helped one of my coworkers a little bit on that project. So that gives you an idea of some of the things I've done. And so the branding project I worked on was interesting because for the longest time, Silvergate, as a San Diego specific bank, we only have this location in San Diego. We're not, we don't have locations in any other state. So we were very San Diego focused. We had this whole kind of beach theme going on. And it made sense back then because most of our customers were based in San Diego, or many of them were, or in California. But as we started having more tech focused and international clients, we realized the need to kind of speak to them a little bit more. So in 2018, a few months after I started on the job, I got to bring my design experience, and we did a really minor kind of update to our homepage. And this 2018 was the first year we started mentioning crypto on our website as a bank. But we recognized that we had so many different types of materials, from envelopes and business cards and letterhead and debit cards and all this other stuff. It was just kind of overwhelming. We didn't have a whole design team to manage this, so we realized we needed to work with an outside agency to get this done. This was my first time hiring a proper design agency. I haven't worked at an agency in the past. Most of the design experience I had was working for myself. So being able to hire an agency was an incredible experience. I reached out to over 13. I only heard back from 7. And then we narrowed the choice down to 2 potential agencies. And ultimately, we went with an agency based in New York City and Sydney, Australia. And working with them was incredible. Everything was done remotely, just because of the distance. But they did incredible work for us. And so, they did all of the heavy lifting around the branding and the logo design. And then on the back end, I got to come in and actually implement this by working with printers to print out the cards, actually doing embroidery on merch for our employees. And I even got to do kind of like mock-ups of what our future business cards could look, debit cards could look like. So that was definitely one of the more rewarding projects I've worked on. I got to be part of the redesign project for the website. And it's definitely made us look like the bank that we are today. If you think about what you saw earlier and what we have today, this really reflects kind of where the bank is and where our customers are. And so, again, the skills that I used in this can be applied to so many different areas of, in different career paths. But one thing that I want to highlight was, persuasive writing and public speaking. You might think, when am I going to use persuasive writing in my career? When am I going to use public speaking if I don't plan on doing something that involves sales or something like that? But in my experience, like, I had to write a business case justifying to the executives, hey, we need to spend this money so that we can get this result. So I had to work on persuasive writing to basically justify the cost for this project. And I actually, before we chose our agency, had a meeting with our CEO and with other executives at the bank. And I had to put on a presentation to them in person and utilize my public speaking skills there. So definitely, like, project management isn't rocket science. You guys have projects in school, and you have to keep track of those somehow, right? Everybody, I think, fundamentally understands the basics of it. It's just really knowing how to use those skills and how to stay on track, and how to use, in some cases, more advanced methods of organizing your work and tracking how it's completed. But to kind of sum up everything I've shared, like I said at the beginning, career paths aren't always linear. They're typically, or at least in my case, it's been it's been kind of a wild ride, but that's okay, right? Like, you have to take what you can get. You have to take what life throws at you, and take all of those opportunities and try and leverage them into something better down the road. The next thing is, like I said, design is everywhere, and good design matters. It matters in business, but it also matters for social issues. It matters for communicating messages and ideas that we need to communicate so that we have a more equitable and just world. And then the last thing I'll say is, working in banking is a lot more than finance and accounting and dealing with number crunching or working as a teller at a branch. You can work as a designer at a bank. You can work as a developer. You can work as a project manager. You can be in HR. There's so many different things you can do. And banking, I've found, in my experience, is pretty good, because they pay, at least in my experience, the pay has been great. They take care of their employees. And there's at least, in my experience, a pretty good amount of stability there. And the last thing I'll say, I hardly had any time to touch on this, but crypto, digital currency, decentralization is here to stay. You may have heard Bitcoin, the price is going up and down, it's super volatile, which is true. But these ideas around decentralization are super important. They will have big implications for our society today and in the future. And so consider looking at jobs in the future in the crypto space as well. So with all that said, there's a couple of resources I'm going to paste in chat, but those are all the slides I have to share. And so I will open it up to questions now.
Okay, guys, you can use the chat, or you can just come off mic if you've got questions, comments, etc. What are your some? Okay, well, there's a bunch coming in. Holy cow!
All right, I'm gonna look at those in a second. As soon as I'm done pasting these links in. All right, I think this is the last one. All right, so
day-to-day duties is the first one, or maybe kind of your day in a nutshell is maybe a good one.
Yeah, great question. So day-to-day duties, honestly, one of the things I like about project management is it's different every month at a minimum, sometimes every day. And so the day-to-day duties depend on the project and depend on kind of what the goals are for the day. But to give you an idea, as it relates to project management, a lot of the stuff that we do, especially because we don't have a huge team, involves talking to people and figuring out what are we trying to accomplish. Whenever somebody comes to you with a new project request, sometimes it's to implement a new piece of software, sometimes it's we're launching a new product. The first question is always, what are we trying to accomplish? And then, when are we trying to accomplish it by? And so the challenge then is usually there's a lot of open questions and people don't have all of the answers. So your job as a project manager is to figure out all of the pieces in between working with the people that want to get that stuff done. Once you actually have a project going, then a lot of my day to day is honestly, it's getting on calls like this and talking to people. It's getting on that and saying, hey, can you tell me the status of this thing? Because we need to make sure that that's on track. In some cases, it's having a difficult conversation with people and saying, hey, this project is going to be delayed for this, and this reason. And so a lot of it is one thing I should clarify, project managers, at least in my case, and I think in most cases, you don't actually have people reporting to you. I am not a manager of people. I'm not anyone's boss, right? I'm in charge of the project and making sure that it gets delivered properly and on time, but I don't have people reporting to me. So one of the challenges and where people skills really come in with project management is getting people who don't work for you to do work related to the project, right? And yeah, so that's where people skills really come in. So to answer Lauren's question, what skills are needed? Honestly, I would say people skills are super important. Being able to get along with people, being patient, being able to ask questions and follow up questions until you get the answer you need, super important. Like I said earlier, research, persuasive writing, if you're going to be writing business cases, presentation skills, it depends. And every project manager is different. Everybody has a different level of skills and different skill sets. Some are stronger in some areas. I definitely have coworkers on my team who are much better at certain things than I am. And sometimes we come together and we work on projects collectively, and we kind of each balance each other out. But definitely people skills are huge. All right, so I see Priscilla asked, what are some difficulties we should expect when becoming a designer? That's a great question. And I think going back to what I said about imposter syndrome, for me personally, one of the things I found difficult when I was in school was looking at some of my classmates' work and thinking, wow, their work is like so much better than my work. And just kind of feeling like, man, should I even be doing this? And if you decide to study design, you may or may not have that experience at some point. But I guess what I'll say around that is, again, having faith in yourself, just as a human being, valuing yourself and your work, and trying to learn every day. I think that definitely can help with it. I guess some more practical difficulties around that. The software sometimes changes quite a bit. There's so many different pieces of software. Some companies use Figma, others use Sketch, others use Photoshop, right? Others use Adobe XD. Like the software is kind of all over the place. But so definitely like software, I'll say this, software is not as important as the fundamental concepts of good design. You could be great at software, but not really get the fundamentals of design. And you're not going to produce really good work, even if you know the software in and out. So definitely making sure that you focus on the fundamentals. And City College's program is great for that. And then as you focus on that, learning the software, kind of helps with that. Okay, see, Luce has a question around what kind of education did I need to be a project manager? That was one of the great things about being a project manager and working in banking, at least with my company. I did not need to have a specific educational background in project management. I know that some schools actually offer degrees in project management, and if you want to do that, more power to you. What I will say is I don't think it's 100% required, depending on the company. Some companies may have those requirements. Thankfully, I work at a company that I think is a little bit more progressive when it comes to that. And I think more and more companies are starting to realize that your work experience and your skills, your soft skills and your hard skills collectively are more important in some cases than a piece of paper from a school saying that you checked the box and you learned X, field of study.
Yeah, I think that's really true in terms of, there are some places where it's kind of a gatekeeping device where they have a requirement of it. Sometimes it is an indicator of background knowledge, but technically if you're a creative of any sort, I mean, they want to see a portfolio. I mean,
Yes, absolutely.
that's where the rubber meets the road. It's like who cares? We don't care about that. We want to see what you can do, and those examples of your work speak everything.
100%. Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Stephen, because yeah, going back to kind of the whole design thing, exactly. The portfolio is one of the most important things you can have as a designer. You could have a nice looking resume, but what they really want to see is your portfolio. So 100%, start thinking about that if you have any interest in design. And by the way, I think I updated my screen share down here in the bottom right. James.xyz is my website. It's still under construction because I'm super busy working full time. So a lot of the links will say coming soon when you click on them. But if you click on that, you can see some of the info I shared in the slides here will be on my site there. All right. Ruben, do I partake in crypto myself? Yes, I own some Bitcoin and I own some Ethereum. It's not a ton. Uh, I'm only 26, so I have not had a ton of time to accumulate wealth or like save a ton. But crypto, I would say, is roughly about 10% of the assets that I own. So, including my retirement account, including my savings account, crypto makes up roughly 10% of the assets that I hold. I see a question around Dogecoin. I don't know what to say about Dogecoin. I haven't really followed it, to be honest. What I will say is cryptocurrency is very volatile. Like I said earlier, Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin is volatile. One thing I will say is, um, just the idea of cryptocurrency in general and decentralization. Like I said, I think it's important. It's something that you should be interested in, especially where you are right now, because the crypto industry, I kind of look at it at similar to the internet industry. In '99, there was a dot-com bubble because there was a lot of greed, there was a lot of mismanagement, and we saw a lot of companies go bust. And we have seen some of that with crypto. But 20 plus years later, we are using the internet right now to have this meeting when that would have been unimaginable in '99 or earlier. And so I look at crypto and the whole kind of ecosystem as a whole as being very early days. And we have not even begun to see the extent of what is possible. Um, there's a lot of use cases, but at the same time, be aware because there's also a lot of vaporware. There's a lot of there's scams. There's a lot of projects that may look interesting and look promising, but in reality, there's not a whole lot to back up with them. So the one thing I can say is do your research and don't listen to people who are all in on one thing and that's all they can focus on because they have a bias and they kind of have tunnel vision in my view. So definitely try to do your research and keep an open mind.
Yeah. Keep in mind that a lot of this stuff is the technology behind it has a lot of value, and just steer clear of the get rich quick schemes because those tend not to work out for anybody but maybe one or two who are involved in it.
Yep.
But a lot of the technology behind cryptocurrency will be very mainstream and will underlie a lot of the financial transactions out there. So 20 years from now, Bitcoin will be mainstream, right? Or whatever else it exists. I echo James in saying, be careful of people hyping up a lot of stuff at this point.
Yes, agreed. All right, I see another question around education. I'll touch briefly on that. Like I said, with design, for me personally, and some of the links I included, there are stories of people who have gone into UX design without having to get formal education in it. Somebody studied, I think, like chemistry or something completely unrelated. So I will say it is possible to get into some of these fields without a formal education. But like Stephen said, it depends on the company. In some cases, formal education or work experience in that area will be a gatekeeping item. It will be a prerequisite. In some cases, it won't be. So it really depends on the companies that you're hoping to work at. What I found is some of the larger tech companies I think are starting to become a little bit more open to that. But in my personal experience, Even though I grew up around kind of tech and computers and I enjoyed it, I really found the education I had at City College super valuable. I don't think I would have the skills with design that I do today if I hadn't gone to school there. So it was super valuable, and I definitely recommend that. This is a great question. Oh, go ahead. I thought I heard someone about to speak up.
Christopher, did you have a question? I think he accidentally came off mic.
Okay, no worries. So I see another question here. Are drawing or artistic skills a must for all those type of design you mentioned? That's a fantastic question. I'm so glad you asked that, because the answer is no. I wouldn't consider myself an artist. I'm not good at sketching or drawing in particular. I mean, I can, but it definitely is not a requirement, especially for something like UI design or UX design. A lot of the tools, I will say this, when you are trying to come up with an idea or when you're trying to work on something, it absolutely does help to start with pen and paper. Many people make the mistake of trying to start with software to begin with, and they start on the computer from the get-go, and they don't explore just pen and paper freeform. There definitely is value in that, but you don't necessarily, those drawings, typically outside of you, or maybe if you work on a design team, the people you work with, outside of that, nobody's really going to look at it. So if it looks kind of not as good as somebody who's really good at sketching or drawing, it doesn't really matter, as long as you're able to clearly convey your ideas and what you're trying to accomplish. So definitely drawing or artistic skills, I would say, are not a requirement for being a designer. Okay, question. What would be your advice to someone who's interested in designing? Um, it's a great question, and I mean, here's what I'll say. Like, if you're interested in it, like, definitely get into it because it's something that you enjoy. Because there will be days when you're working on something where, there's a deadline and people are on you about getting this or that done, and it might get frustrating. And you definitely want to get into design if you have if you enjoy it, and you get fulfillment out of it. Me personally, I love building things. I love creating things. One of the first projects I can remember in high school at High Tech High, fortunately, was building a website, and I got a lot of joy out of doing that. Creating something that hasn't existed before is something that I think is special, and like I said, I get personal enjoyment out of it. So when I'm doing that for work, it's just I'm getting paid to do something that I enjoy. So unfortunately, right now in my current role, I don't do as much design as I used to. So sometimes I'll work on projects on the side, or if there's an opportunity, I'll use my design skills in my current job. But definitely get into it if it's something that you think you might truly enjoy. Okay, I see a question. What things should we start working on now in order to succeed in graphic designing later on in the future? It's a great question. And I'm going to briefly go back to this kind of first, or one of these earlier slides I had. Really don't wait for anybody to give you work, because that's what I started doing in high school. It was really naive of me thinking I could like get hired by some kind of design firm as an intern or something, a paid intern, which didn't happen. Not saying that it can't, but in my case it didn't. So what I would say is don't wait for other people to give you work. If you have something that you're interested in, it could be business related or not. It could be a personal project. It could be a social, cause or social issue. If you go on my website, one of the first links that you'll see is a website I made called sayevery.name. That's the URL, sayevery.name. And in 2020, when I was looking at the protests that were happening, and I was just kind of observing everything that was happening, I felt a sense of despair for our country and for what was going on. And I thought, what can I do? And I talked about earlier how design can be used for good. One of the things I did on my own time, nobody asked me to do this, it's just something that I felt I should do with the skills that I had. I built a website to kind of memorialize people that have died due to police interactions and other circumstances. And so, again, it's something that nobody asked me to do, nobody paid me to do it, but I felt it was something that I should do with the skills that I had. So definitely don't wait for people to give you work. Think about something that you want to do. It could be commercially related or not, but just start. It's never too early to start. Um, all right, I'm Stephen. I'm glad to keep going. I just wanted to be respectful of your time and everyone's time. So let me know if
It's
we're
up to
running out.
everybody in here. If you want to keep going and answering questions, I'm good with it, or whoever wants to hang out is still good with it. We're not required to be here past this time or anything, but it's up to anybody else. If you want to keep asking him questions and he's nice enough to stick around, that's not an issue.
Sounds good. All right, I'm good to keep going. I do have a 3 o'clock, so we've got about 20 minutes left.
Yeah.
So, all right, how did you benefit from? I'm assuming, Christopher, do you mind re-asking, like, when you say IT, do you mean like information technology, or you're just talking about technology in general? All right, technology in general. So, all right, I didn't have a chance to talk about this earlier, but one of the things that was super helpful to me, kind of even before this slide that you see here, right? Even before I went to high school, um, and this is something for all of you that may or may not have this in your life. Something that was hugely monumental to me was having a mentor as a kid. I had somebody in my life who was kind of like an uncle to me. He wasn't family, but he acted like a mentor to me. He works in IT, and he taught me about computers. At 10 years old, we built my very first computer in my bedroom from parts that we bought at Fry's. And rest in peace, Fry's. They're now, I think, going out of business.
Yes,
But I have fond memories of going there and getting computer parts with him. And so because of that early experience that I had, and my mom also enrolled me in kind of like a IT related class when I was even, I think, in elementary school. So I mean, kudos to my parents and to my mentor. So those experiences prepared me to have the job that I had at Paradise Village, working in IT and working at this other senior living community. Even though I didn't have formal training or education there, I had enough working experience and hand-on experience from a young age where it opened up those opportunities. And like I showed later on, it brought me eventually to where I am today. So definitely, if you don't have somebody, an adult or a classmate or somebody in your life that you look up to, start thinking about how you can find somebody, reach out to somebody and say, hey, I would like mentorship. One of the things that I started doing as, like I said, looking at everything that happened in 2020, thinking about the world that we live in and what kind of world, I hope that we can have someday and that we can continue building towards. One of the things I decided to do was sign up with Big Brothers, Big Sisters of America to mentor one-on-one a young kid who kind of is in a similar situation to what I was in. It's different but similar in the sense that he needed an adult male figure. I needed an adult male figure in my life that could kind of teach me skills and interests and hobbies and goals for the future. And so it's my hope that I can do that for him now that I am where I am. And definitely I highly recommend trying and seeking out a mentor. I know it's easier said than done, but that was hugely influential to me, and it's definitely something I can recommend. The other thing I would say is there's definitely so many resources online. Some of the YouTube videos I posted, some of those people are designers. They talk about their careers, their day in a life. They talk about what they make even more transparently than I did. And I definitely recommend taking a look at that because there's so much valuable information. You don't have to have one-on-one mentorship. If you can get it, that's fantastic. But if you can't, there's still so many great resources that you can look up online.
I think I have one
Okay.
more question, which was when you mentioned that careers are nonlinear, what do you mean they don't follow a path? I can kind of address that a little bit. A lot of when we talk about linear, it means like you decide on a career, you go to college, you get a degree in that, you go straight into that particular career and stay there a long time and maybe get promoted and things like that. So it's more of a step-by-step type of thing. I think for most of us out there, what happens is we think about going into a certain field, we gain a bunch of skills, we may transfer different industries, right? We may go from self-employed to employed, things like that. So usually the pathway isn't just, 1, 2, 3. It's a lot of times it looks kind of like this, right? But we usually end up somewhere that we're leveraging our skills and we're happy. That's the idea. So sometimes you have to bang around a little bit.
Yep. Yeah, and I will say this, like, if anything, the pandemic has shown us that all work is valuable, right? You should never be ashamed of honest work. The people that we're calling essential workers, in some cases, are paid, some of the lowest wages, unfortunately, and yet they're out there working out of necessity in many cases and risking their health, but they are essential workers. And so when I drove for Uber and Lyft and I delivered packages for Amazon, it wasn't glamorous, right? I could tell you stories about picking up drunk people, but I won't. And so, it wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. It was hard work. I had some great experiences doing that. And even though it was gig work, I was just a contractor and it was temporary, I learned something valuable from it. And definitely you got to do what you got to do. And there's no shame in that whatsoever.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming by today. I do appreciate it. Like I said, I'll be posting this link for students to watch as well. And I'll probably be in contact with you when we start our entrepreneurship program up next year on campus. We didn't have it this year, unfortunately. And I'd love to have you come in and talk about design to some of our students groups who are trying to design their first business.
Awesome. Okay, great.
So I think you got to add a lot of value there, and it's a lot of fun. So I'll be in contact with you, and again, when we have other events come up, I'll keep you posted on these. But thank you so much for generously giving your time back here. I do appreciate it, and I think it's great insight into design and what it's like in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. This was fun. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Everybody have a great weekend.
See ya.
I'll see you.